Everyone that's waiting in our Zoom room to come on in. And we'll get going. All right.
Sounds like things are happening.
Yeah. Kia ora, Tato. Welcome. Welcome to another Q&A here at Digital Boost. Today, I have the pleasure of hosting Phil Howie from Onwardly. And Phil and I were talking earlier about his platform and the cybersecurity platform that you have. And you're going to tell us a little bit more about that and about you. But today, we're going to talk about getting cyber resilient. So, 3 steps to protect your businesses. It's amazing, Phil, how much we're talking about this right now. This has been a subject for the ages. Like, it's in the zeitgeist.
For
Everyone's
sure.
talking about it. I said this to you earlier. It's not just the security people who are talking about it. We've got our social media people talking about it, our marketers talking about it. We've got who else did we had accountants talking about it, and all for good reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all on our minds. Like, welcome everybody. It's nice to be here at the webinar. So thanks for hosting me. And look, it is really, I mean, I think ever since COVID times, it hasn't really slowed down. It's easy to talk about the doom and gloom around this. I won't try and do that too much. I think everybody's aware of that, but it's something we kind of need to take seriously. And I think, along with privacy, it's now just kind of table stakes. I'll get into the presentation in a second, but it's not really optional anymore, and it never really was. But I think people now are waking up to the fact that this is kind of mandatory if you want to do business, particularly if you want to do business internationally. We really need to kind of up our game here. So hopefully we can help
Yeah, I
everyone
think
today. Yeah.
I know. I think the analogy that I love to use that I've heard before is we wouldn't leave our doors unlocked to your house, to your physical home. You wouldn't leave your door unlocked. So why are we keeping a space where, the ghosts in the ether can get in, the man in the machine can get in? We really need to learn now. And it's just about educating ourselves on what that looks like. What are the locks on the doors? How do we get in ourselves? What are our keys? So this is really exciting. I love having you here and I love what we're going to talk about today. So all of you who are watching and listening from, far and near in Aotearoa, make sure that you pop your questions into our Q&A if you're on the Zoom. If you're in the LinkedIn, I will check that, and our YouTube or our Facebook. I'll see if there are any comments or questions there. But that's what I'm here for, and that's what Phil is here for. We're here to answer your questions so you can learn all about this.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you, Phil.
No problem. Oh, good to be here. Look, yeah, please ask us anything.
Mhm.
Preferably relating to cybersecurity and privacy, but I'll do my best. So look, pop in a question. I'm really happy to answer things as we go or at the end. So don't be shy. I know people are sometimes a bit shy with these things. So pop it in. We'll do our best to answer that. Sure.
Great. Yeah.
All right. Is now the time to push the present button?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Let's see if we can do this. Okay. So hopefully this is showing for everybody. Cool. All right, thumbs up. Well, look, today we're going to talk about 3 fundamentals around being cyber resilient. So 3 steps to protect your small business's future. So cybersecurity is sometimes a bit mysterious. It's sometimes one of those topics where it seems either really expensive or really hard or really confusing. So I'm here to share really 3 fundamental aspects to protecting any organization with any sort of information. So basically everybody that you can do right now by yourself. It doesn't take very long. And with a little bit of effort and application, you can do this immediately. Obviously, I run a software platform. Well, obviously, I'll introduce what I do. So I'm Phil Howie. I run a platform called Onwardly. We're a SaaS product. So think a little bit like what Xero is for accounting. We do that for security. So we're a cyber resilience platform for small to medium-sized businesses to help you confidently improve your security and privacy maturity. Now, what does that mean? So it means we sort of stick everything on rails for you and make it really easy to sort of assess, plan, organize, and carry out the work that's needed to protect your organization, whether it's things like putting policy in place, training your staff, putting key bits of technology in to protect your information, and so on. There's a whole spectrum of activity, and many people are good at some little bits and pieces of that, but they don't necessarily have a holistic view of the whole program of work that needs to take place. So that's what Onwardly does. It provides you really a high level context to govern everything relating to security and privacy. So your obligations under the Privacy Act that we have here in New Zealand, and actually beyond that internationally as well. Um, So, my name is, like I said, my name is Phil. My background is in product and engineering. So I was employee number one at a Kiwi company called PushPay. You might have heard of it last decade. And for my sins, survived about 7 years in the startup rocket ship. And I learned a lot, really. And from pretty much day one through to a publicly listed company worth a couple of $1 billion and an extremely fast growth. And security there was really key, a very key consideration being a fintech company. I was really front and center in the coalface of dealing with a lot of that sort of work, and took the experience of managing a lot of that work at PushPay and into my next venture and started Onwardly. So Onwardly is a product really that's designed for SMEs, or small to medium-sized businesses, that's affordable, actionable, and can really help you build a key capability very, very fast and manage it ongoing. In real time as well. So we're about superheroes. This is Jester. You might have seen her on screen. She's our mascot. We designed her especially for Onwardly, and our theme with Onwardly is to take everyday people and turn them into security superheroes. So that's her. She's awesome. We're going to illustrate a few more characters as well in the coming near future. So she's not alone, but yeah, that's our mascot, in case you're wondering who she is. Cool. Well, today we're going to cover, like I mentioned, three fundamental aspects of information security practice. So this is really key for everybody, whether you're a one-person organization, battling it out, doing some good work, self-employed or what have you, running a little key business, or maybe you're 10 people, maybe you're 20 people, maybe you're 50 people. Even hundreds of people in an organization need to do the same fundamentals. So we're going to cover those one by one. We'll spend a couple of minutes on each. We can talk to those. If you have any questions about these, then feel free to pop those through again into whatever chat you're looking at, and we'll do our best to answer those either as we go, or perhaps at the end as well. So that all sound good? How am I doing so far? Good? Cool. Okay, so look, first and foremost, we're going to talk about protecting your identity. So fundamental to the web and being online is protecting who you are. Now, what do we mean by that? If someone can impersonate you, whether it's they can send an email as you, or they can send a Slack message or a Teams message, or even a text message as you, then you've lost your identity. And keeping your identity is fundamental, as it seems kind of obvious, to protecting your information. If someone can impersonate you, they can gain access to all sorts of things. And so it's really, really, really critical, first and foremost, that we protect who we are online. And the way that we do that is we do things like we use strong passwords. So passwords. People hate passwords. I know. I hate them too. But they need to be managed effectively. And what we need to be ultimately doing is using strong passwords and unique passwords for every service that we have. Now, I know this is a tall order.
Phil, I don't want to cut you off here, but it's just reminding me of like the times where I had like just a little post-it note with all of my passwords on it, like in my desk drawer. Like that was my life. And that post-it note might still be somewhere in my desk drawer.
Well, look, I mean, it's very common for people to use pretty much the same password for everything, or have maybe one or two variants of it that they kind of use for everything. Look, one of the key things you can do is use a long password, so not necessarily a complicated one. So, things like hashes and weird numbers and replacing letters and things like that. That might help a little bit, but actually length is really the key. So a phrase, so maybe 3 words combined, something like that, is much more effective, because it essentially creates a level of complexity that computers would take thousands of years to hack.
So that's interesting. So it says when it says minimum 8 characters, don't do the minimum of 8 characters.
No, ideally, something like 12 to 16 would be better, much better. And don't just use a word from the dictionary, right? Because it's really, really common practice to essentially try a bunch of we're commonly known passwords against some sort of service, and unfortunately humans are kind of predictable in that sense, and we think we're being really clever, and you're not. Things can be guessed very easily, and so length is really key. So one of the key strategies is like a key phrases. So you might take three words and essentially combine them together, maybe even with like a hyphen in between, and that creates a level of complexity that would literally take, like I say, thousands of years for computers to try every iteration of that and solve. Obviously, computers are getting more powerful, but this is fundamental. And what I encourage people to do as well is use a password manager. Now, sometimes, operating systems and things kind of have password managers built in. So, if you're using Mac, you kind of have this thing called Keychain, and it might set passwords for you and then bring them back. And that's a really good start. Windows, I'm sure, has sort of the equivalent, and sometimes browsers like Chrome have it as well. But you can use a piece of software called a password manager, which essentially generates random passwords for you, saves them, and saves your secrets, and keeps them much more secure. And it means that if you're using a service and that service has a breach and your password gets leaked out online, then the damage is limited to that one service and not everything you own, which is really what we're trying to avoid. So, choose good passwords, choose unique passwords, and you try and use a password manager if you can. There's a really great one called 1Password. There's lots of other options as well. It's cross-platform, but you can use it on your mobile app and your desktop computer as well. So the next thing probably to talk about here is 2FA. So two-factor authentication codes are really, really key in protecting the services that you have. They're just another line of defense, which makes it a lot harder for an attacker to get through that. Now, you're probably using them already on some of the services that you have, whether it's maybe your bank, maybe it's like your Apple ID or your Google ID or something like that. The key thing here is to try and enable it for everything. Now, that might sound a little bit intense, oh my gosh, everything I'm going to be entering codes all day long. It's like, well, yes, you are. And that's the way to do it. That's unfortunately what we need to do to protect ourselves to that next level. So the reason we try to do it for everything is because some of the more minor things that you might use online can be used as escalation points. So if they get breached, or if they get in somewhere like that, they can use that as essentially a way to communicate to some of those more important services or verify things, and they can be escalated up to the really, really critical stuff that you need to protect. So turn it on for everything. Turn it on for your business email, turn it on for your messaging systems, turn it on for your bank, turn it on for the other software products you are using if you can, and turn it on for your personal life as well. So something that's just not as obvious is that, if your personal email gets breached, that can be used as an attack, essentially an escalation point into your business email as well. So please turn it on for your personal email. Please turn it on, encourage your friends and family to turn it on for their personal email as well. And it may just protect you from something, much worse. So please turn it on, and you can do that right away. It takes 5 minutes per service. Go in, spend a little bit of time, look through those critical services, and just turn it on, and make it mandatory for your organization as well.
Yeah. And I just want to really hit home, because we had talked about this before, Phil, before we went live, your personal emails, right? Like, make sure that you have 2FA for your personal life as well as your business life. Like, it is so easy hackers are smart. They're smart. We're smart. We could, if we wanted to be hackers, we could figure it out too. Just get into the mind of a hacker, and how would you get in? It's not just like my 81-year-old next door neighbor who doesn't know how to turn on her phone. But I'm going to hack, but I might. Quite nefarious.
Well, look, a common scenario might be like, I'm busy. I'm in my personal email. I'm at work and I get an email from the boss or someone in work, and it's from their personal email address, and they're like, "Hey, it's me. I'm just in a rush. Can you approve this invoice, or can you make this payment, or can you unlock this for me? I'm just busy at the moment." And you don't, you might think that's I know it's them, but if they're being impersonated from their personal email life, then you may be giving critical access to people who shouldn't be having it. So really, really critical to think kind of down the chain. How would people weasel their way into your digital world? And they do it through the weakest link, essentially. So
yeah, and I think having these examples are really important for us to hear, like that example you just gave, because it'll give us pause the next time that, your boss sends something from their personal email. You might just go like, wait a second, where otherwise you're like, I'm busy, I'm stressed, I've got a lot to do, I've got to answer my boss, blah, 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 or I'm the boss, I need to answer myself. I don't know. But yeah, so
yeah. And look,
yeah.
and so the really sophisticated attacks were things like people, like, you'll get an email from, say, your boss, and then you'll get another confirmation from another colleague in the company saying, yeah, can you approve this as well? So you get two forms of validation, both that might be false, and you approve it and you make it go because you're like, well, I was asked to do that. So it's we just have to be really careful. And this is part of how we prevent that sort of thing from happening. The last point, I guess, on identity here, and there's a lot to talk about with identity, but was just about careful with sharing, right? So I know we like to kind of share logins to some things, and like I'll just use my login to log into like this or LinkedIn or whatever it is. Really careful with that. The more people that obviously have those details, the more risk there is. Generally, what we try to do is set up a unique account per service and delegate access to it. If you do have to share it, again, our password manager is a really effective way to share a complicated password with people without, texting and sharing things insecurely. So there is a better way to do this, and that is with a password manager. Sometimes it's unavoidable. But there's a way to do this. You can even share 2FA codes in that context as well. So there's a level of protection there. But be careful with that. It's common with like social media logins and things like that. Or even things like credit card numbers, all that sort of stuff. So just be mindful of that. The more that you share, the more that it gets out there, the more risk there is. So something to keep in mind. Cool. So that is identity. Really, really important. Probably the most fundamental aspect of information security is protecting your identity. So there are some things you can do right now in your world after this webinar. Go and log into some of those key services, turn two-factor authentication on, consider a password manager. And if you've got really terrible passwords, please go and change them to something much longer and more complex and unique, especially for the very, very critical things in your world. So email, messaging, banking, things like that. But ideally everything. So.
And I think there was some talk in a previous, we have a question and I'll get to you in a second. In a previous session, we were talking about not using your browser password manager, potentially. Like Google, I think Chrome has a password manager, and we were saying like those probably aren't as safe as using something that's really going to lock it down. Would you agree with that?
I mean, look, it's safer than using nothing, for sure. I mean, Google takes security pretty seriously. I think ultimately probably an independent password manager is best. But look, if the next best option might just be to use, unique, strong passwords that are locked away in like a browser context. I don't think that's a terrible thing. It's certainly better than just managing them yourself in your memory or on a spreadsheet or something like that, which people do, right? Or some sort of like note app, like please don't do that. So look, I think it's just various degrees of effectiveness here, and if you can improve, if you can go to the next degree from what you're currently doing, then that's great. So I wouldn't necessarily say that's a terrible thing. It's all relative, right?
Okay, good to know. And then a question here: if a friend is hacked, can the hackers get through to me?
It depends, right? Like depends how they're hacked. Like if their email address is compromised or their all their contacts and information are compromised, then they may end up tapping on your shoulder somehow. So yeah, I mean that is a possibility. It really depends. So like, I think if someone loses their Apple ID, for example, and like all their contacts and identity are all synced with that, then they may be able to just text you or message you or send something to you impersonating that person. So yeah, like I'd keep a lookout. If someone says they're hacked, I would, if you think you're hacked, I would probably let people know as soon as possible, particularly key people in your world, that hey, look, I may have been compromised. Can you just verify anything that you see coming from me in the near term while I figure this out? A friend of mine actually got their Instagram account literally just taken over wholesale not that long ago. They had a couple of thousand followers. The hacker essentially somehow bought access to their account online, super sketchy, but it worked. And they renamed the account, changed the photo, and started promoting service things through this Instagram account, which had thousands of people. And this person, my friend, was essentially powerless. They couldn't really do a lot. They had to set up a parallel account and try and sort of convince everyone to sort of follow the new one. They eventually got the old one back, but it was a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare. So, again, really careful, really good passwords, 2FA, that sort of thing makes it a lot harder for those folks to gain control of accounts. Be careful with, duplicated, like sometimes, you might get a new friend request from someone you already think you're connected to. Maybe it's like on Facebook. I've seen this happen multiple times. The same photo, someone's essentially being impersonated against their will online. So just kind of be skeptical, verify it. Sometimes it's really hard though, right? Like we're just busy. We get this thing it looks legit. And if unless you look very, very closely for a long time, it can often be quite hard to tell. So we just have, especially with this time of year, we've got couriers arriving, we've got parties to go to, we've got lots of stuff happening. Just being a little bit wary of things like that, because this is the time that people like to kind of ramp up that sort of activity, because they know people are busy and they're likely to just, be more forgiving of that sort of thing. So
Yes, but essentially, I think so just to reiterate here, if your friend is hacked, they don't have access to your information just because they got into your friends, but they can impersonate. They've got access to your contact information,
correct.
but they don't have access to your bank accounts unless you and your friend have a joint bank account.
With them. I mean, look, I would be wary, if you've someone you've shared a lot of information with, and all that information is then compromised, like it's a risk, right? Like if you've shared bank account numbers and you've shared like addresses and phone numbers and all sorts of stuff like that, then that's probably a little bit of cause for concern. So I'd be on the lookout. I would be extra sort of aware that maybe some of that critical private information has actually been compromised. So this is why we encourage our friends to take security seriously too, because they have a lot of information about us, and if that information gets breached, then you're kind of exposed a little bit by default. So.
Well, that leads us to this next question here, which says, when you say to put a 2FA on everything, is it easy to do? Could you give an example, say on Facebook, or a common one that most use?
Yeah, it's relatively easy. I mean, some services make it slightly harder than others, but generally, if you poke around in the settings long enough, you'll find it. It's in this, usually something security or private and passwords and things like that. It's usually free. It doesn't really cost, and obviously products like Facebook are incentivized to do it, because the fewer breaches that they have, the better. So certainly social media, social networks are really important. Banking should absolutely have it on if it's not already. Things like, accounting systems like Xero, I think might have it enforced now. So some services are going as far as basically saying it's not really optional any longer, which is great. We don't make it an optional in our product. It's on by default. You can't turn it off. So that's a good thing. But if you're using CRMs, things like HubSpot, very much so, turn it on and find out a way to turn it on. I pretty much start by Googling how do I turn 2FA on service X, and I usually find their support article or something like that, and just takes me straight to it. So do that, figure out how to do it, and take the time. I know it's annoying. I know it's really annoying. But we've just got to do it. And it's just unfortunately the world that we live in at the moment. It will protect you. It's way less annoying than having your information spewed across the internet. So.
And this is why we have experts like you on here, Phil, so that we can get educated and learn these styles and techniques and what we need to do. And even if it's just as simple as like Google 2FA, just take the time to learn. And once you know it, then you know it. Once you have that information, then you're educated, you know how to lock your door, you're good to go.
Yeah. Indeed, and there are, if you want to get technical from it, there are authenticator apps, or apps that kind of will generate codes for you, so you don't necessarily need to receive text messages. But look, a text message is certainly better than nothing. But if you can do it without necessarily relying on SMS to do it, it's even better. But look, just start somewhere. Even if you have it turned on in the most simple way, it's far more effective than not having it at all. So it's all about degrees of protection, right? Like there's the gold, absolute platinum standard. But it's, if you're right down here, just taking the next step is the most important thing. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Awesome.
All right. Very cool. Back up your stuff. Again, kind of simple, but hard to do. So what are backups about? Backups are about resilience. So we try to protect ourselves as much as possible. Unfortunately, no one can guarantee that they are 100% safe. It's just reality. If someone really wants to take you down, they probably will if they have enough resources and power to do it. So backups are fundamentally about getting back up. Sorry, didn't use the pun there, but the getting back up off the ground, it's about resilience and recovering from an incident or something that happens. Now, sometimes things might happen by default. I've been in scenarios where really critical data has been deleted by accident. Classic stories about, some sort of office, tennis ball landing on a keyboard and pressing delete. But, sometimes it's less obvious than that. People are working late and they literally press the wrong button and things are deleted. Or it could be, something more nefarious. Someone actually gets access to things and deletes critical information, or locks it down. You can't access it. So backing up is about creating a copy of that information that's stored in a separate place, ideally, that you know you can recover and get back up and running from. So we have lots of information in our organization. We have emails, we have back office and calendars, we have files, we have databases, we have all sorts of things. Some of those are a little bit easier to back up than others, but fundamentally we should be trying to back up critical information for that we use to run our business, or that is critical for our business to actually even exist. So in the web, in the product world and the software world, it's often the production customer database that's the most important. So if that's to go, then you've lost your entire product and service effectively. And people are usually not too stoked to find that all their information is gone. So that's one that's backed up and treated very, very carefully. But things like email, and email is important to try and back up as well. Obviously, files, things like that, accounts, financial information, source code, things that is commercially sensitive, legal documents, all those sorts of things should be backed up, ideally somewhere different to its original location. And it's about testing that regularly as well. So it's not enough just to have a backup. You actually need to be able to restore it. And that's an entirely different thing. So many organizations they might think they have a backup, and they go to restore it. They find they didn't have a backup, or it wasn't working properly, or they can't restore it. So, the gold standard is really having regular backups and regular drills to essentially test and restore those to regular functionality to see that it actually works.
So I have a question about that, and then we have a question in the chat as well. How regularly? What is regularly for you? Is that monthly? Is it weekly? Like, what would you recommend?
Sure. Well, a question to ask yourself might be, how much am I prepared to, how much data am I prepared to lose? So, if you wait 30, are you prepared to lose 30 days worth of information if you only back up once a month? Are you prepared to lose a week's worth? Are you prepared to lose a day's worth? So, that might inform your decision about how regularly you want to do that. And, because you may end up losing a little bit as part of the process. It's really hard to lose absolutely nothing, depending on how much you want to throw at it, how critical that information is. But probably a good conversation to have with a board or with a team to say, okay, well, if we were to have a breach, are we comfortable losing a day's worth of information, 2 days? I mean, not comfortable, but how much do we want to throw at this? So I would say back up as often as you can. That's not too cost prohibitive. And data storage is pretty cheap these days. So I think backing up sort of weekly or daily is not out of the question. In the production database world, you're effectively doing it more often than that as well. So, we had an incident in the last one of the companies I was part of previously, and we didn't lose any information at all. So that was good. It just took a long time to kind of recover and repiece it all, but we didn't lose anything. So
oh, that's fantastic. Yeah.
that was good. It's not always the case though. And so you might back up really regularly, and you might test it, say, monthly, or test it a little bit less frequently, obviously, because you just need to verify that things are still working. But testing that perhaps monthly or even quarterly is probably a good idea too.
That's great. So the question we have in the chat is, by backup, do you mean saving all of your work to the cloud, or are there other ways to do this also?
I think backup fundamentally means there's a copy of something that's in a separate place from its original location. So, you might have stuff in the cloud, which is, seemingly fairly resilient, and you're not going to lose it due to necessary hard drive failure. But if that's the only copy and someone gains access to that copy and deletes it, then it's gone. So it's not just backing up to the cloud, it's creating a separate copy of something in a different location. So with different user access. So it's not just, zipping everything up next to the original file location and putting it there and saying, yep, we're cool. Because if that gets deleted, then it's all gone. So it's about having a copy of the information in a different place under different access rules from its original location. So you might have a bunch of files stored in Dropbox. That's cool, but if that's the only location, then they could be compromised and deleted. So perhaps you have a different location or a different service that you store the really critical stuff in, and you create a copy of it. If it's a production database, that might be in Azure or AWS, but then you back it up and you store it in a different place, and all the way down. Even things like email can be backed up. There are services which allow you to do that as well. So
Yeah, I'm just curious, is this a function of Onwardly as well? Do you do backups through the
No,
website?
we don't do backups per se. We just
Mm.
help people think about that and plan that work accordingly and report on it. So, different technology requires lots of different sort of ways of doing things. So whether it's file systems, email calendaring systems, production systems, there's lots of different ways to back that up. But the point is to really, really do it. So,
Great. Thank you.
mm. So back up your stuff, people, and do your personal stuff as well, right? Go mix personal, back up your photos, and make sure you've got some of those key things. People have kind of lost, for example, they've lost access to their iCloud account, and the whole thing's erased, and you're kind of it's game over. So please back up your personal information as well.
Yeah, I think the last time we talked about this, those of you who've been following along and joining me on these pretty regularly, you heard my story about losing the whole second year of my children's life. Like all of their photos are gone. Year
Yeah,
two.
yeah. I had a friend.
Cutest year. Cutest year.
Uh,
Gone.
that's heartbreaking. I mean, I had a friend who sort of had like 7 years of photos on some like old laptop, which was like 12 years old. And we weren't even sure if it was going to start, you know. And I said, okay, we need to get these photos off. And this is my moral imperative to help you do this. And so I basically forced them to load their laptop out. We copied them off. But you know, things don't last forever. So just be mindful of all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, Phil, your friend and I are kindred spirits, I think.
New Year's resolution.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, we'll move on to the third one. So hopefully everyone's still with us here. How are we going for time? Oh, we have 47 minutes. Okay, cool. So keep it up to date. So update and patch everything. Now, most devices hopefully are set to auto update, but this is really, really critical. So security vulnerabilities are found in the wild all the time. So there are a bunch of professional people out there and some non-professional that are looking for vulnerabilities in the software that you use. So whether it's your operating system on your laptop, whether it's your phone, whether it's some other piece system that you use, there are people actively searching for ways to exploit that software. And occasionally, quite a major one might sort of be found, which has existed pretty much maybe for the last 10 years. So, or since day zero, effectively. And the manufacturers, so things like Apple and Windows and Google, Microsoft, they all pretty much urgently issue patches, hopefully, and send them down the pipe. And so your computer will scream at you to update. So this is really, really critical that you actually do this. I know it's a pain, but it's really critical. What I encourage everybody to do is set their laptops and their devices, everything as much as possible to auto update. So it'll be patched, it'll be regularly installed. You'll need to restart your computer every now and again. I know it's annoying, but let's just do it. Do it once a week, do it once a day, whatever you need to do, but make sure you install those patches because they could protect you from some sort of exploit. And sometimes the exploits are crazy, like you just open a web page and something compromised, or you submit a form, or you do something weird in a web browser and things can happen. So really, really important that you're patching things regularly. Now, this might also extend to certain systems that you look after. So if you look after a software system, you've got a whole host of dependencies and libraries that will need to be updated regularly too. And sometimes there are various reasons why it's a bit hard to do this. There might be incompatibilities introduced or major versions which require some code changes. But really the more often you can keep up to date with these on a regular basis, the easier it will be and the more protected you will be. So patching everything all the time is really, really, really important. Now, sometimes things change, people's cheese get moved. You might sort of log in and suddenly the UI is different or something like that. Can be a sort of a consequence of updating things really regularly. Now, hopefully that doesn't happen too often, but it's worth it for the security protections that those are involved with. So you need to restart your browser, you need to restart your laptop. Your phone hopefully might even just update itself overnight. But I really encourage people to just constantly patch and update things. It will keep you protected. And because security, there's a lot of people working really, really hard to issue security updates and make sure that people are as safe as possible. So all you need to do is just download those and install them and restart. So really critical. And make it policy as well. So, if you're in a business where people are bringing their devices to work, which is almost everybody, and they have maybe some company information on those devices logged into company email, logged into company chat systems, etc. Then make it policy for people to auto update as well. So, if people are using, devices in their world, whether it's work issued ones or personal sort of blended ones, then it's really critical that you just try and make that a policy for everyone and say, hey, look, I know this kind of sucks, but please, we need to auto update. We need to make sure that they're kept safe because we've got really sensitive company information on these devices effectively, sort of right next to your personal information. So it's really critical that those are kept up to date. Yeah. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I think, and like you said, it's one of those things where we see it and we're like, ugh, I don't want to update it. But you hear so many horror stories about people updating their phone and losing photos and losing this or losing that or finding glitches with the updates. But that's not really what's happening here. It's really important. Security things are being updated. And I think that's the most important thing that we really need to keep in mind. You see that little thing and everyone gets a little like, just do it.
Yeah. I
Just
see
do it.
people like on webinars and they've got like Chrome open and it's like this glowing red button saying please update, and I'm sort of sitting there like twitching because I think that they need to update this thing. And I know it's annoying, right? Restarting Chrome can take longer than restarting your entire notebook. So, it's almost like an operating system in and of itself. So I get it. I think browser manufacturers and device, operating systems are getting a little bit better at not destroying people's data when they update as well. I haven't seen that happen as much recently. It used to be a little bit fraught. But what they've essentially done is just they do it more often. So there's less delta, there's less change between each one. It's not perfect. Look, I get it. Computers are hard, but
Computers are hard. I know.
computers are hard.
It's
Software
like,
is hard, people. Public service announcement. So please, it's remarkable that it all works so well, to be honest. But occasionally it goes wrong. So update, and you'll get bug fixes, you'll get improvements as well. So it's generally worth doing. Yeah.
and a good point that you said that the updates are coming more frequently. So it's not like you're going to have something really throwing anything for a long period of time. So if there is a bug that does happen, it'll get sorted
Yeah, and the more
very
frequently you
shortly.
update, the less risk of something huge changing. If you're updating from 3 major versions ago, like it's more likely something might go a little bit strange, but generally the more you update, the easier it is to update. So particularly true with code libraries and things like that. It's much easier to go from 1 major version to the other than it is 3 major versions, right? And people kind of get stuck. Sometimes they get stuck on old versions where they literally can't update without major changes. So it's kind of you can get a bit trapped. I know sometimes devices get a bit old and they stop getting updates. Hopefully they get some security updates. But yeah, look, if your devices are extremely old, you are a little bit more at risk as well because vendors essentially stop updating them after a while. So
Yeah, that's true.
sort of
Yeah.
that in your world. Yeah. Yeah. But always run the latest. Whatever you can run on the latest thing for your device is good, generally good practice. Yeah.
Lovely. We've got a question here. I plan to import goods from overseas, so we'll have a website with a purchase portal on the website.
Okay.
Would you recommend getting a professional to do the website as opposed to doing your own on Squarespace, et cetera, in regards to keeping your website more secure? Good question. What do we know about Squarespace's security and all of that?
They take security pretty seriously, to be honest. I think they're probably not a terrible option. Like I think they've got a team of people investing hundreds of millions of dollars a year in basically advancing security and practices across the hundreds of thousands of websites that they serve. So I think it's probably not a bad idea to use an off-the-shelf product like that. Any fixes or vulnerabilities that are identified are immediately applied to those. So depending on your needs, I think it's probably quite good to go with something like a Shopify or a Squarespace to start with, and then if you really need to go custom. But the more custom you go, the more expensive it is, and the more you need to kind of pay attention to this stuff, to security. More kind of if you get someone to custom to build this for you, there's a lot involved in that. It doesn't mean it can't be made secure. It can be. But those services like Square, they deliver a tremendous amount of value for a very, very, very small cost. So my general thought is to try and get as far as you can with those before you start writing your own code or custom developing something, depending on what you need. If it's just not going to work for you, then I get it, sure. But you can do quite a lot with those. So generally the less code, but there's a saying in the software development world that the most secure code is no code at all. So it's the code you never had to write. any code you write is potentially has some sort of risk associated with it. So the fewer systems that you need to look after, the less code you need to write, the better, basically. Make it someone else's problem. If someone else is investing millions and millions of dollars in that, then just, get on that train because they're doing some good work there. They can probably get you most of the way there as well, would be kind of my thought.
Yeah, thank you. I hope that answers that question for you. Any other questions that you have, just bring them on in. We're here. Phil, do you want to tell us a little bit about Onwardly? I'd love to know a little bit more about the platform and how it helps businesses save time. Oh, quick question before you get onto Onwardly. What should we do with an old device? How do you close it all down? How do you close it all down?
Close it all down, yeah. Well, that's a good thing, like disposing of devices, right? You want to erase them. Some phones and even laptops these days kind of have a way to sort of reset themselves. Really old ones, it's a little bit harder. But for example, if you're in kind of the Apple world, there's an erase all content and settings. So don't just give a device to somebody with all your stuff still on it, erase it. Generally, they're pretty secure at erasing things down to kind of nothing. So use that functionality. I mean, I even Google things like what's the safest way to dispose of this particular device? And often the manufacturer will have some information on that. So you definitely want to erase them. If they're kind of just, not being resold or something like that, there are places you can sometimes donate old gear to, and they will actually erase it for you.
You would hope, right? You hope they erase it for you.
Yeah, well, they're sort of trusted to kind of do that job well. That's kind of what they do. So, I would log out of everything for sure. I would try, at the very minimum, if you can't reset it yourself, then just log out of the key services, log out of your email, log out of all that, and that will destroy the authentication for that particular device and make it much harder for someone to just open it and relog back in. So, sign out of things, sign out of your Apple IDs, sign out of your email systems, sign out of other services that you use. Really, really critical. And try to erase them yourself. And if you can't, take them to someone who can do that for you, and maybe even recycle that gear. If it's things like little thumb drives and stuff like that, I would actually just destroy them. Don't leave them lying around, just actually destroy them. I've got a shredder in my office, which I can shred things like CDs. Not that I use CDs anymore. But credit cards are another good one. When credit cards expire and you get a new one, destroy it. Cut it up into tiny little pieces. Try and just discreetly, get rid of it. I put my credit cards through the shredder, which is awesome. And I do that once every couple of years, and occasionally I did the wrong one as well, which is hilarious. But destroy things securely like that, particularly ones with lots of files. It's really common to have USB keys kind of floating around the office and things like that. You should probably keep track of those, right? Write them down and say, okay, there's actually this USB key. Maybe if you're hardcore, put a label on it, so people know what it is. But keep track of these things because they can have a habit of just disappearing, and that's not usually great. So, old devices you want to dispose of carefully for sure, because people can grab hard drives out and then just have full access to your file system, which is not ideal. So,
yeah. It's so interesting, like how much you can actually access and mine out of these old devices, or like you said, little USB sticks. I've got them all over the place. We have no idea what's on them. What's on those? Yeah.
Yeah, it's really common for people to put a couple of gigs worth of data or something like that, and then transfer it to somebody else in the business. They sort of forget about it, and a couple of years later, it's still sitting there, for a visitor to the office to kind of just pick up and walk out with. So just be careful, and if you are going to put things on removable devices, just erase it as a matter of course. I do things like I put a reminder in my own device to say, erase this or log out of this or change this, so that I just don't forget. And it comes back up in a week's time or a day's time or something like that. So just practice clean up after yourself for sure.
That is a really smart idea. Just giving yourself a reminder of when cleaning that all up. Yeah. Otherwise it's just there.
A long time ago. So, I just rely on computers to remind me to do things now. It's much more effective. It's more effective for everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. Look, we're almost at an hour, so that went really quickly. So Onwardly, we've got a special offer here as well. So what Onwardly is a software as a service platform which helps small to medium enterprise businesses, much like yourselves, I'm sure, build resilience both in the form of security and privacy. And so what do we mean by that? So we help you organize and plan all the activity you need to do to keep yourself safe. So in addition to the core fundamentals we've just talked about today, we have a whole lot more things, many more things that you can do in your world, practices you can put in place, processes you can do, templates and policies you can apply to make sure that you are keeping your business safe, you are building resilience, and you are treating people's private information with care and respect. So privacy is a whole other sort of work stream alongside security. You probably have a privacy officer, or you should have in every organization. You might not have thought about it enough, but we help you sort of develop competency around all of the privacy obligations that you have, which is just good for business, to be honest, as well. So we're a platform. You can purchase us. You can go to the link you can see on there, onwardly.io/boost, for a special offer for Boost listeners, and we'll love to talk to you. So please check us out, have a read, and if you think that this might be something you're interested in, then please get in touch.
That's great. Phil, I was going to try and pop that into the chat here. So you keep talking while I while I pop that into the chat. It's onwardly.io/boost. That is a really generous offer. Thank you so much. And I see that you also have a free trial where people can trial Onwardly. You know what I love about it is I love how you said it's like the zero for cybersecurity, right? So it's that kind of idea. You know, we have all our accounting in one place. Why not have our privacy and our cybersecurity in one place as well? And for those of us who are trying to figure it out, like some of the questions that came through, how do I do that? How easy is it? I mean, yeah, great. We can figure out how to do that on our own. And that's why we've got you here to give us these tips and tricks. And then we can also, make the investment, which I think it's pretty reasonable.
Sure, we have
Onwardly.
a startup plan for businesses that are really just kind of getting off the ground with Onwardly. We have a professional plan, which is, if you're a little bit more established and you need a higher level of sophistication there, we've got kind of everything for you there, right up to sort of bigger businesses as well. So it's really affordable, and we even start to kind of resell some through some of our partners as well. So if you happen to be working with an IT professional or a security consultant already, you can get us through them as well. So, multiple ways to kind of find us, but onwardly.io is a starting point there. And we're really built for small businesses in particular. So, we understand that it's complicated, that there's a lot of jargon. So we try to avoid as much of the complication as possible and make it really straightforward for people to follow and to implement and to build real, genuine resiliency. You don't have to be a security expert. You can either try and start to do this yourself and make some real progress, or you can work with a professional as well and collaborate with them in the platform. So you can do it either way. But the important thing is that you can make real world progress in your organization on both security and privacy.
I think that's important. I think it's a great tool to have right now in this day and age, especially as we were saying, we're talking about this and people are like, what am I doing? So it's brilliant. So I would say, take Phil up on that offer. Although at Digital Boost, we don't have favorites, but I love the idea of this platform here. It's brilliant. Yeah,
And it's an important communication tool as well. So it's sometimes hard to talk about security. So part of what we're trying to help people do is really put some words around it and visualize, their own level of progress that they're making. So we do all that as well. So check out.
And what were you saying about, it's hard to talk about security. And it's one of those things where a lot of people who have been hacked or have had these situations and feel a lot of shame around it and don't want to talk about it and don't want to look at it. It's important that we are talking about it and having this dialogue and having these discussions so that we all know, no, there's nothing wrong with you. You didn't do anything wrong. It's just the more you know, the safer you're going to be. And this is a fantastic tool for that. Yeah. Phil, thank you so much for taking the time. I know I love having these experts on and you're just offering your time to us and we appreciate it so much here at Digital Boost. I love chatting with experts and learning more myself. And I know that everyone that tunes in loves to learn more as well. So I don't know, maybe we can get you on another time and we can talk deeper about some other things.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Happy to talk. I love doing this sort of thing. And look, thanks everyone for tuning in and listening. Hopefully you got something valuable out of this. Go and do some of these changes right now. Don't delay. I encourage people to do just a little bit every day or every week. Set aside some time in the calendar and actually just kind of start to do this sort of thing. So it's really, really important. Your business, you worked really hard for it, so protect it, please, and be successful. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming along. And if any of you have questions while you're trying to do your 2FAs or anything like that, you know how to find Onwardly, but you can also check us out at support@digitalboost.co.nz. Our support team is there for you, waiting to answer your questions as well. It's not me, it's my friends. They're answering your questions. Thanks again for coming along, and I'll see you at the next Q&A.
Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Matewa.